I was researching papers on head-related transfer functions, and I found a paper that talked about when recording them in an anechoic chamber, only the direct sound is present, and this would make it difficult to localize a sound source, as the absence of reflections would sound artificial. So I did some further research, and I read papers that found room reflections actually degraded the quality of localization. They all found that early reflections had little impact due to the precedence effect, which fuses together two sounds if they're close together in time, and later reflections distorted the directional cues. I wanted to create first-hand research that measured whether the direct sound was enough for accurate localization, and if reverb had a positive or adverse effect on it. I feel that my project succeeded, as my results were conclusive to back up the findings from multiple papers that I had researched previously. It proved that there was a definite decrease of perceptual accuracy with increasing reverberation. The angles I chose for my experiment considered the cone of confusion effect, meaning I didn't use any angles diagonal to the listener. However, only 2 out of the 5 angles I used didn't have identical interaural time differences, which were left and right. Interaural time differences are primary cues in sound localization, which meant that the results for front, back, and above angles weren't conclusive. This is because by using non-individualized HRTFs and having a subject listen through headphones, it meant the secondary binaural cues such as pinna reflections weren't as prominent, especially with the high frequency stimulus used. The experiment managed to get 20 participants, which meant the conclusions made are less valid. For future work, a larger number of subjects would be ideal, towards 50 or more. The questionnaire was distributed to about 40 people, but only half took part, which meant it could have been too long or there was no extra incentive for completing it. For me, the most interesting part was working with MATLAB to write a script that convolved audio with the database of head-related impulse responses. I tried to create a script that was reusable for different audio and impulse response files without changing the code. This presented me with a challenge, and I had to create code that was efficient. Before starting my project, I had basic experience with MATLAB, and through its process I managed to teach myself much more, for example using for loops. I also really enjoyed reading about directional audio and all the different psychoacoustic effects that determine how we perceive direction. The most difficult part of the project was managing every aspect that needed to be covered in the background section. There were so many theories and papers about topics that were relevant to my experiment, and organising them all mentally and physically in writing was challenging. The effect of reverb on sound localization is somewhat vague, and it encapsulates so many topics like psychoacoustics. The way humans have evolved to process sound direction means we're more sensitive to wide noise bands than pure tones, for example. Other topics were the dominance of certain binaural cues, like interaural time difference, which change with frequency. Once I had researched what I considered was every relevant topic, and by writing each subheading, it was a lot easier to manage and write about.